The journey towards learning and understanding the brain is a crucial one if we want our students to succeed in the future and also in our classroom. Neuroscience and education have come together to try to figure out what is learning. If learning is what we value, then we ought to value the process of learning as much as the results of learning. During the Industrial Revolution, we had a key change in how we taught our students. No longer were they taught by their ancestors and by their mothers and fathers, but they were learning how to do everything in a factory line way. It changed the model for most societies. Unlike in the past, employees were expected to do all activities with stringent guidelines. So all the products that were produced were the same. This approach made its way into the classroom for all students. Behaviorism was one of the ideas that would help people understand what they were trying to achieve during the Industrial Revolution. Behaviorists suggested that the way to increase learning was through conditioning, which they classified as either classic or operant. The idea was that you could practice an idea learning into the person if you repeated it enough and gave the rewards or punishments to support the behavior. Many people would think of Pavlov's dogs at this point. Be able to train them as well as possible. Also, social learning theory was in this time. The observational learning theory suggests that learning occurs through observing others in a social context, and through the interaction of cognitive, behavioral, and environmental influence. I've seen this method in many lessons, planning work time after time, and in such educational activities as mentor programs at different grade levels and transition teams for middle school at-risk students. I always thought that if you really wanted to understand something, then you should teach it. So I agree with this idea to a point. Now looking forward, we were looking at current trends. One of the ones that has always become popular is the multiple intelligences. Howard Gardner brought those into our world with verbal linguistics or language, logical mathematical, the use of numbers, and visual spatial, body kinesthetic, physical motion, musical rhythmic, sensitivity to tones and rhythm, and interpersonal person-to-person relationships, intrapersonal self-awareness, and naturalistic connecting with nature. Traditional storytelling inside a TP was one of the lesson plans that I used to help with many of the different multiple intelligences. What we did was actually put up a TP. We used the linguistic tribal languages for the storytelling inside the TP in whatever tradition storytelling we were using. The visual spatial location of the storytelling really helped the children to really understand how it would have been done in the past. And the body kinesthetic connection is sitting in the proper places according to your station and gender. All females on one side, all males on another. The owner of the TP was put in a certain place, and this was just order within the society. And the last would be interpersonal and intrapersonal relation was they were aware of how you could sit and how you relate to others in the room. The girls actually had to sit a very specific way because in the past they would have been wearing a dress. Now we go on to brain-based approaches to learning. In learning, the transfer of learning is an excellent way to connect students to the past knowledge in order for them to understand new information. The constant use of this approach can lead to students really understanding how to use information you teach them inside and outside your classroom. One of the examples that I used was mock voting. I made sure that my students understood how important voting was in normal society and how important it was in our classroom. Because of this, the students had to actually research a lot of the information so that they would be educated in their voting. And I explained to them why just because a person is an adult does not mean they're an educated voter. And they seem to be able to take this into their next life. And one of the reasons was because most of them were juniors and seniors, and many of them could actually vote that year. Now we go to individual and social factors. One of the things that I thought was interesting in the neuroscience study was on a biological level, threats increase stress, which can cause the loss of short-term memory. So why do we think punishment will help our students learn or want to be in the building? I've used this in and out of the classroom. I find that all the threatening does is stress them out. If you can figure out solving a problem with each other, it's a lot more effective. A challenging environment is also a crucial place to work with students. When you build in academic rigor, everyone succeeds. When they realize that you have expectations of them that some other teachers may not have had, they want to strive to do their best for you. Now, with all this information, you also have to bring in technology. Too often we do not remember that these students have tremendous amounts of information and in the technology world, and we don't use it, and then we wonder why they can't connect to what we're teaching. Having technology at the tip of our fingers is a resource that the teaching alumni of America did not have. We need to embrace that change and see how we can incorporate the ideas our students already know into our day-to-day routine. One way to do that is through website development, developing an interactive website connected to storytelling from the elders in the area, and letting the students add those stories and also prepare it for other people to look at, such as other school districts and other historical society. Finally, the brain research that Dr. Wolf talked about so eloquently is that your brain starts searching through huge networks of neurons and tries to make sense of all the info. If it is nonsense, it will be forgotten almost immediately. I thought it was interesting that she said that basically our brain was made to forget. I didn't understand it fully until she started explaining it. And one of the ideas that she had was sculpting through experience. She believed that the entire environment, teacher's voice, lack of threat, the ambiance of the situation, hands-on activities, all impact the students' brains. It's one of the reasons that I chose the music that you're listening to now. The brain also seeks for meaningful patterns. The main purpose of the brain is to survive. If the info is not meaningful to the student, they don't store it. The brain is hardwired to hang on to the things that make sense. That was entertaining when she talked about the saber-toothed tiger. You're not worried that they're pretty or what the sky is looking at the time. You're supposed to be paying attention to almost dying from the saber-tooth. 99% of the information that students do get and ourselves is not relevant. So the key is, how do you make yours in the 1%? And one of the ways is through the memory. The amygdala and the hippocampus also hold emotional memory and store episodic memory. So one of the ideas that I wanted to bring across was the procedural memory that Dr. Wolf was talking about. Practice makes permanent. I thought that was interesting because you always hear practice makes perfect, but I've seen people constantly mess up on something, and just because they redo it over and over does not mean that it's successful. In declarative memory, you pay attention to the reciprocal or peer teaching, metaphor and analogy, problem-based learning, and visuals and graphics, simulations, hands-on activities, and rhythm, rhyme, and rap. My example as a lesson plan was visiting the Crow Reservation trip. Using peer teaching, we raised teepees and learned traditional songs, and problem-based learning, teepee raising, and traditional games. Each of the students had to figure out how to put their teepee up, or they were not going to be able to have anything over their heads for the night. Their visuals was actually staying where Custer attacked the Northern Cheyenne at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And the hands-on activities was cooking for our elders so that they knew how to respect them. Ultimately, we need to let our journey begin and have research from brain research. Brain research should be able to help us through all of this.